doing this ahead of a Christmas party and all that kind of stuff. So let's talk bragging rights. Let's do it. It is the 200 level. Mike Carpenter in the basement studio. Merry Christmas, everybody. And isn't Christmas that much sweeter when Illinois wins the bragging rights game? This is the 5th or 6th time that I've been down there. And for me, I've been lucky to see some really memorable games. The first one that I saw was back in 05. So this is December of 05. Dee and James are seniors. And as I write about in the book, this was the infamous popcorn getting dumped on Quinn Snyder's head game. Same game, I believe, as Chief getting tackled. But that I would need to actually check. But, the rivalry was in a pretty ugly place then. And Missouri fans were understandably very angry about the way things were going. That was a lot of fun. And I remember distinctly walking through Union Station, which is right next door to the stadium, and wearing my Stitch D. Brown jersey. That was my lucky jersey throughout all of the 04-05 season, and feeling like we were invincible. And this was a team that ultimately didn't make it out of the second round against Washington, but they were still pretty damn good. And Dee and James were still kind of carrying the torch for a golden era of Illini basketball. Went the next year as well, my sophomore year at the U of I. They won that, though I can't remember too many of the details about that because this is when the doldrums of the Weber era really started kicking off. Did not go back until John Gross was coach. And I was lucky to see 3 really good games of John Gross versus, I think that's the Frank Haith era. So in 2012, both teams are top 10. Illinois coming off a win at Gonzaga and the Maui Invitational. Missouri was loaded, ended up being a 2 seed in that year's tournament, but Missouri won a close game. And then in 2013, which might still be my favorite, Tracy Abrams hit some late free throws to finally get Illinois over the hump. I believe we lost 2 or maybe 3 straight to Missouri. It is a series, after all, of streaks. And that was an especially sweet win. And then the next year was Ray Rice's buzzer beater. But that's 2014. So it would have been 10 years since I had been to a bragging rights game. And I went to a good one. And I feel lucky, again, that I've only seen 1 loss and that most of the games have been pretty damn good. Now, yesterday's game was not aesthetically pleasing all the time. And despite the high score, 80-77, which would lead you to think, hey, that's a pretty exciting game, it was actually really brought down a notch by what I thought was putrid officiating. And you know this from things I've said on the podcast to things I've tweeted before. My last possible step that I would take as a fan is to blame officials, even when maybe I should do it more. I just have this thing about, listen, officiating is what it is. You cannot control it. So why waste valuable air getting worked up about it? But yesterday was a particularly awfully officiated game in both directions, but I do feel like towards the end of the game, especially towards Illinois, fouling at Merez and Trey White on questionable at best foul calls, where you saw these guys in the black and white stripes were just, at that point, guessing what would happen next. They were anticipating the call instead of actually making it. And that's what's frustrating. But you won. And I think the big deal with winning yesterday's game, despite some external factors going against you, despite some sloppiness on your part, and despite damn near pulling off what you did against Tennessee and Northwestern, which is to say blowing a late lead, in this case a 10-point lead that should have been 12 if KJ would have made that layup, you pulled it out. You made plays in closing time. You got the stops you needed. And fortunately, Missouri's not a great shooting team. But then on the other end, KJ, Kasparas, a special dude, a special basketball player, helps get you over the hump. And one that I cannot overlook in this game for Illinois, and the importance of what he did on the court, is Kylan Boswell. I know I named this episode after Kasparas, and for good reason. 6th straight game with 20-plus points, which ties a Big Ten freshman record. I think he joins the ranks of Michael Redd from Ohio State, and I forget the list of the 3 or 4 other guys, but it is elite company, and he is an elite player. Yeah, there's some mistakes, but you know what? You take it because he's just that good, and he's going to win you a lot of games this year, and I'm going to enjoy every minute that I have watching Kasparas in a Illini uniform. But to me, the heart and soul of that game yesterday was Kylan Boswell. And I know to say that, the heart and soul of the game, kind of cliche thing to say. But boy, oh boy, That dude flexed on that court. And in a game where you needed to be tough and you needed a veteran presence to sort of steady the ship when things were getting a little bit crazy there down the stretch, Kylan was the one getting key rebounds, taking it to the rim, making free throws, all but one. And that's for Illinois as a team. 22 of 23 from the line. And I had to do a double take, but it made sense. Because as the second half is going on and we're getting back to the line repeatedly, I kept thinking, I don't think we've missed one. And then he missed the most important, but I can't fault Kylan for going 8 of 9 or whatever he finished at because he was so good. And to me, what was most exciting about Kylan yesterday, and we're going to talk about all the individual players and performances yesterday, the good and the bad. Kylan was vocal to his own guys. There was a possession on offense. Tomislav messed something up, and I didn't pick it up necessarily right away. It might have been a bad pass or he wasn't looking for it, but the team huddles up, and I see Kylan going up and kind of patting Tomislav on the chest and basically saying, get your head right, or something thereabouts. I thought, damn. Okay, Kylan, because I think Tomislav's actually older in terms of age. Kylan's just been doing the college basketball thing longer. But I see him getting up in his grill. I see Kylan after the game. This is a clip because it was kind of a scrum down by the Missouri bench, and we were behind the Illinois bench in the Illinois basket. So we're a ways away. This is a big basketball arena made for hockey, right? So we're a pretty decent distance away. And Kylan goes rushing over to get his guys, get him out of that mess. Let's go celebrate. Let's get the trophy. And that matters for a team like this. Listen, as fans, we're looking for threads to get into this team of a bunch of new faces. And Kylan seemed to be the most obvious link from Champaign, played ball in Champaign, went to Arizona for prep school, and then went to Arizona for the first 2 years of his career. But we were always thinking, man, wouldn't it be nice to get Kylan back on board? And now that he's back, the first few games left you wanting because it's like, what is his role here? He seems a little bit out of sorts. For the last month, Kylan has been very, very good. And no, he's not shooting nearly as well as you'd like him to, but he's doing everything else right. And I think the offense will come. And what was really cool yesterday is seeing him just say, screw it, I'm going to the rim. Over and over and over. I'm going to the rim. I'm going to draw the foul. I'm going to make my free throws. I'm going to defend. I'm going to get rebounds. Just a balls to the wall performance from a dude that is built like an H-back and just has, I mean, in a way that Dimitri McCamey had. You look at him and think that's a bulldog, right? He's got some dog in him, as the saying would go. And that was really exciting to see. And then you see that all of a sudden kind of trickle across the rest of that bench and the starting five, whichever that will be going forward. We'll talk about that. And you see KJ with that swagger, which I think he has on his own, but now they're feeding off each other. Now Trey White in the huddle, there was a video yesterday of him saying belt to ass on three. Belt to ass on three. Whoa. Okay. I like the edge. For a team that I thought, as Jeremy and Derek pointed out on their podcast yesterday, like them, I thought finesse, offensive-minded team. Great shooters. We'll have to see how the defense develops. Well, actually, it's kind of going in reverse. The shooting's not there yet, but the defense and the rebounding are. So shoot, if you start making those shots, this is a pretty good thing here. And I do think from the defensive perspective, from the toughness perspective, nobody is embodying that more than Kylan. I really wanted to start this podcast by shouting him out because while this is named a very Kasparas Christmas because he's a star and he won you that game with big shots, Kylan was 1B. He was right there. I just couldn't think of as good of a pun for Kylan Boswell for Christmas. That's it. So it is so much more fun to talking about an Illini win in the Braggin Rights game. It would have sucked to lose. We were outnumbering Missouri fans probably 70-30. I did not gather that right away because from our seats behind the basket, we don't get quite the panoramic that somebody would at midcourt. But when you saw video and photographic evidence afterwards of the expanse of that arena, yeah, it was 70-30 orange to yellow and black. And that's a pretty cool thing. And certainly a series in which historically Illinois has dominated 28-15. You win two straight, and then you literally have a 6-6-7 win percentage in a rivalry game, and it is still a rivalry game. To me, the most exciting thing about watching that is that the game developed and you're seeing all these new faces. It truly fell back into that. It doesn't matter who the guys are, it's the names on the jersey. And that seemed to just conjure up just the right amount of hate and tension between those two teams for what was, while ugly and intermittently, or actually often interrupted by officiating calls, that turned that into a really fun early afternoon in St. Louis. And Illinois is the victor, 8-3. Pretty good record, all things considered, for a team that is figuring itself out, and I still feel like will be the best version of themselves in 2 or 3 months. So let's talk about it. What better way to get into Christmas spirit than talking about a Braggin Rights win? Got to thank, of course, Hamilton Walkers, downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. Had a great dinner there last Thursday with some friends and family and enjoyed not one, but 2 old fashions. I know, I went crazy. And the food, as always, was terrific. And it was really cool to see how many people were out there in the bar area and back in the actual dining room enjoying a pre-holiday meal. Great spot for it. My personal favorite place in Champaign, and we appreciate their sponsorship this year of the 200 level. That is Hamilton Walkers, Steak, Seafood, and Spirits. Also got to thank Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. Give them a call at 217-841-4728 for any furnace issue that you might have this winter. We got a nice warm stretch, if you will, over the next week or so, 40s and 50s, but then, sure enough, long-term says a cold start to January. So I will be rudely interrupted from my little vacation in Orlando when I get back into Indy, and I'm reminded of a Midwestern winter in the 20s and 30s. That's why you want your furnace in tip-top shape, and that's what Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing can do at 217-841-4728. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. Life, auto, home, business, renters, you name it, Brian is my guy, and he can be your guy as well at brianismyguy.com. And also Owen Builders LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. You can check out a gallery of all the things they can do for your home at owenbuildersllc.com. Also get a free quote while you're there. I cannot shout out Luke and his staff enough. Really easy to work with and great on the communication front. Not always the case with contractors. I appreciate all of those who bought the book. I really do. We had a really good month locally on Amazon, and I was hoping that it would be sort of the stocking stuffer that Illini basketball fans would like to dig into, and it seems like that was the case. So I really do appreciate that. And ran into a couple of folks at the game yesterday, too, and appreciate meeting you guys. And just the shout-out, just it's cool to be out in the wilderness, so to speak, and run into, hey, Carp, enjoy the podcast. I mean, that really does mean a lot, because the cool thing about podcasting, and why I loved radio before that, and still think radio is such a great medium, is there's an immediacy and an intimacy in hearing one person or multiple people talk and feeling like you're a part of the conversation. So I assure you, as I sit here on December 23rd, at the risk of sounding sentimental or a bit saccharine even, I truly appreciate being able to do an Illini podcast for fun. I mean, that's what it is for me. I got a day job. So this is scratching that itch of something that means a lot to me, and it means a lot to you, because we follow these teams and we live and die by them. And I am very humbled whenever I run into somebody and they say, hey, enjoy the podcast, Carp. So that's really cool, and got a few of those yesterday. Had a great time in St. Louis. I mean, we left Champaign bright and early, 7:30. Got the early check-in at 10, and it is a quick trip. It's funny how when you're a kid, these trips always seem longer. And then the older you get, you're like, St. Louis, 2.5 hours, that's it. No traffic, easy interstate trip. Boom, you're there, Braggin Rights. And then we're driving back today thinking, why don't we do this every year? So we might have started a new Braggin Rights tradition, because even with the noon tip, and I wish it would have been later, still had a great day in St. Louis, which admittedly kind of a ghost town, downtown, which is where we stayed for proximity to Ballpark Village, patios, Maggie O'Brien's, the stadium itself, Union Station. Like, we kind of worked in an L shape. Some of our favorite parts yesterday, patios, was nuts before the game. Cam's level nuts. And you could see how that's probably a great Cardinals pregame spot, and it was the Illini spot. Tons of fans, music bumping, got our first drink there, walked over to the stadium, and I've always enjoyed what is now the Enterprise Center. It was the Scott Trade Center for a while, the Kiel Center before that. It is a big arena. I think 22,000 people can fit there yesterday. It said 18.5 were in attendance. It looked damn near close to a sellout. Not many open seats from what I could tell. Maybe they were sprinkled throughout. But it gets loud in there. That is really an arena conducive to great atmospheres. Afterwards, walk over to Maggie O'Brien's. They all got Irish names down there, which is weird because St. Louis is a French city, isn't it? St. Louis. And it's got some of the same sort of iconography as like New Orleans, right? It's a river town. A lot of the French traders. I don't know history, but sounds right. Nonetheless, all the bars down there are basically named after Irish people. So we go to Maggie O'Brien's, a lot of Illini fans there. Talked to some nice Missouri fans as well, one of whom said, hey, I'll be rooting for you guys. And I said, thanks. Because I could not say I'll be rooting for you guys too, because that's a lie. I'm not. I don't root for Missouri after this game. Quad 1 win, sure, have a decent season, but I don't care if they don't. In fact, it's funnier when they have a bad season. So I think Missouri's fine, but they are in a really good conference, and they will probably have their struggles. From there, go to a cigar bar. Ash and something rather, but it's by the Slough area. Cannot recommend it enough if you're a cigar fan. Some Illini fans were kind of camped out on these couches, and we settled up at the corner of the bar there. Cigar and old-fashioned. Great barbecue. It's Salt and Smoke by Ballpark Village, and then ended the night, me and my buddy Andrew going to now what is called the Horseshoe Casino. And listen, I've been in worse casinos in my life. Not bad. A lot of Illini fans again. It really is cool after a win, no less. You see the Illini fans, and there's just this sort of like knowing nods and glances like, yeah, we got it. And it feels good. It's even better to wake up the next day, and I still had some Illini swag. I go to get my coffee at Starbucks, just going down the street. Yeah, we won yesterday. Braggin Rights. St. Louis, something that's been going on for 40 years, right? I mean, 28-15 in the neutral site would tell you my math. What is that? 43rd year that it's been a neutral site game for these two teams. So you're going back to 1981, 82. And, I mean, I've only been to a fraction of those games. But it's something that as a rivalry was always kind of a marker that you're in the Christmas season. So there was that attachment that I often had with, let's say, the family Christmas party, which so often seemed to align with the Braggin Rights game, sometimes frustratingly so, because it's like I just want to focus on the game. But then what actually happened is for some of our family Christmas parties, they happened to align with when Illinois started winning the series again under Bill Self. But I'll be honest, for me, the 90s were not a great time in that series. I often remembered thinking, why are we driving all the way down to St. Louis, Illinois basketball, to play what's supposedly a neutral site game in the state of Missouri? To me as a kid, I just couldn't reconcile that for some reason. And yeah, Columbia is a lot closer to St. Louis than Champaign is. And the 90s were not a great decade for Illinois in that series. Norm Stewart started to beat Lou, and you saw that Lon Kruger only won one of his four. So Bill Self, all the way to now, it's been very much a one-sided series. And there's been a few that Missouri has won. They beat Bruce Weber twice, John Gross once, Brad Underwood 4 times. And I was on the drive back today talking with my friend Andrew about the series and how important it is to me. And I said this, and I'll repeat it at the sake of sounding like a complete lunatic, but the series matters enough to me where sometimes my idea of a Illinois player's legacy is including how they did in the Braggin Rights series. That might sound ludicrous to Illinois fans or especially outside observers. It is, after all, one game on the schedule. But I'll give you an example. Ayo Dosunmu may be one of the most important players in Illinois basketball history. Not maybe, he is. All of this success that Illinois is enjoying under Brad Underwood does not happen in this way without Ayo Dosunmu. A Pied Piper of sorts. The first big one to get you back off the mat and make you relevant. For that, he is always secure in Illinois basketball history. Whenever he's back, heroes welcome, deserved. One of my favorite Illini of all time, but bear in mind, unlike the Trevors and the Isaacs who got 10 less years than I do, I have a deeper well to draw from. And I don't like that Ayo went 0-3 against Missouri. I don't like that. Yeah, Loyola, that was bad. And that, unfortunately, was a little bit of a chink in the armor. But for me, also the 0-3 against Missouri, I can't put him on my Mount Rushmore for that. I can't. You might say, Carp, that's a single game. He had so many more moments that overshadowed Missouri. You're right. They, on the whole, completely overshadowed an 0-3 record against Missouri in that series. But all I'm saying is this. If you were to ask me how important is this series, I would reply with, however an individual player has done in that series affects how I view their legacy as an Illini basketball player. If even just a little bit, a small factor in that ultimate overall resume, right? It's not like I'm indicting a player for, oh, you were great except for that. But to me, it does knock him down a peg or two. Again, I will accept if anyone heard that and said, that is ridiculous, Carp. It's just Braggin Rights. Yeah, it's fun, but come on. I'm just saying that having grown up with it and knowing what it means every December and knowing how good it feels when you win that game and then feeling that much more attached to it when you finally make it down to a game. And 05 being the first time I did that. And now, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was the 6-1 this time. And how much fun it is when you're down there and when you really do appreciate the environment. It means something maybe more to the fan base than the players now with the NIL era. But, yeah, I just was reflecting on that today and thinking, man, I really do place a lot of value in this game. And how it goes tends to have, however small, a bit of an impact on Christmas. It's a slight tinge. The sun is just a little bit brighter. Or if it's a cloudy Christmas, the clouds aren't quite as dark. You won Braggin Rights. It always leads you into Christmas. And, yeah, I love that. And when it doesn't go well, the sun isn't as bright and the clouds are a little bit darker. It sounds ludicrous to some. I would understand. But maybe this is more older fans, and I'm pushing 40, so I'm not a spring chicken per se anymore. It does mean something. So it was cool to see this basketball team respond in the way that they did yesterday. Now, let's go through the individuals. Kasparas, as mentioned in the intro, is a dude. And early on, he seemed to be gathering his footing. Different environment for him. Different arena. I mean, it's the biggest arena they played in so far. And again, it's suited for hockey. So what you have is behind each basket, you have rows of seats on the actual floor. It is a very wide floor. And I noticed from our seats behind the basket in the 100 level up in row CC, we're getting up closer to the suites, and I'm like, we're kind of far away. It was a decent vantage point because you're pretty elevated, but we're kind of far away. So shooter's eye, or shooter's perspective, all the different things that you got to factor in with the new environment, and plus the uncanny way that the fan volume will bounce from one end to the other based on what happened. You saw Kasparas kind of gathering his bearings. But I tell you what, when it comes down to it, if you need a play made, I have all the faith in the world that Kasparas is going to make it. And I say that after him having 2 very untimely turnovers late against Tennessee. I still want the ball in his hands. The dude is going to take and make most of those big shots, and he's doing this as a true freshman. Albeit someone that was a professional or semi-pro out of Lithuania. This guy has plenty of experience, but not in college basketball. And he's already playing at such a high level that we aren't talking Big Ten freshman of the year. We're talking Big Ten first teamer. I mean, that's right now a given. There are not 5 players in the Big Ten better than Kasparas. And there aren't many freshmen in the country better than him either. There's a reason he's getting these looks in the top 10, sometimes top 5 in the draft. And you saw it with a couple of his step-back threes. You saw it in his step-back, 12, 15-footer that was the ultimate game winner. That is an NBA move. You cannot defend that. He gets a space. He's 6'6". You aren't blocking it. He's got great body control, so it's no skin off his back to be fading away. I mean, that move was such a pro move, and you knew it was going in. Normally, I wouldn't say a fadeaway is a good shot. For him, it is. That was so in control that I thought, damn, broke the guy down, created the space, up and in. I won the ball in his hands. So Kasparas is a star. If you're a Missouri fan, you're watching that game and think, oh, he is that good. And we, as a fan base, 11 games in, are already a little bit more accustomed to it. So there's not any shock value anymore when Kasparas does something amazing. But I still notice myself, usually with these step-back threes, that normally I'd say, what are you doing? Except he makes seemingly more than half of them and often draws the foul to make it a 4-point play. And I'll just look at whoever's next to me, whether it's a friend or a stranger, and be like, and shake my head. This dude is special. So enjoy it. You are, I'm sure. It would be redundant for me to say, guys, enjoy what you're getting out of KJ, because this is it. We know that. But it sometimes bears repeating just because of how freaking good he is. So that's why we call it a very Kasparas Christmas. The dude closed out when he needed him to. There were not the bad turnovers in the last couple minutes. And another thing about Kasparas, too, the defense is pretty good. He is fairly disruptive on defense. His guy does not get by him very much. That'll play in the NBA, too. And I know the NBA is struggling. They got a whole host of issues with ratings way down, but they are still the best basketball players in the world. And if you watch an NBA game, you can just, your eyes get really wide just seeing, whoa, how do they do that? Well, the one thing that often gets lost, the better teams in the NBA, yes, they still play defense. If you're going to win an NBA title, you got to play defense. What I see with Kasparas is not only is he a super talented player or skilled player offensively, but he very well could project, if scouts in the NBA would look at it like this, to be a winning player because of the fact that he does it on both sides. And that, to me, is kind of fun. I'll key in on him on the occasional defensive possession. And he just knows the angles to take. When it comes down to anyone ever trying to back him down or go one-on-one against him, he's got the lateral quickness to not really allow that to happen. There are very few moments where I look at Kasparas defensively and say, uh-oh. And keep in mind, that was game 11 in college basketball. Yeah, he's playing dudes over in Europe. He's playing dudes in college basketball, too. And he's just better than them. Most games, the best player in the court will be Kasparas on either two sidelines. Huge advantage for Illinois. Freshman or not, you got the dude that every other team would like to have. So I want to start with that as far as the individuals. And I mentioned Kylan earlier and talked about him in the intro. And just to repeat the main point, Kylan's intangible qualities, how he's developing into a leader of this team, that to me is most exciting. We knew that he was capable of scoring. I know he's not shooting well, but he is getting to the line, which he didn't do last year. Listen to Jeremy and Derek. He got to the line like 39 times last year in 36 games. And now he's doing it regularly. And the offensive philosophy of Illinois, spreading it out a little bit more and not clogging the lane with the big, that helps him. But he just took it upon himself to be the aggressor yesterday. But while that's all great and the encore performance has gotten better and his defense, we know what it is. We see it. An absolute bulldog. He put Anthony Richardson, took him completely out of the game. I know Tamar Bates, and of course, Tony Perkins got theirs yesterday. Annoying. And don't worry, we don't need to see Tony Perkins ever again, unless you see them in the tournament, which I don't think you will. And Kylan is a very complete player right now. If he starts making the occasional three, whoa. And you know he's capable of it. So I view this as an acclimation period of, here is your role on this team. He has adapted remarkably well in 11 games to being the second ball handler, who you saw him spell KJ a lot in that second half, especially when Missouri would bring the press out. And it was Kylan that was the steady hand. Very Dimitri McCamey-like. I just watch him and I see Dimitri, probably body shape and all that, but even just his general demeanor. I always loved Dimitri. I think Kylan has some similarities to him. So shout out to Kylan again. But you go down the list. There were a lot of good performances yesterday. I mentioned Trey White earlier. Really feel like he's getting comfortable. Did not feel that way going into the Wisconsin game. I wondered, where's this going with Trey? 3 straight really good games where he's good for, I know 23 against Wisconsin, but against Tennessee and Missouri, he's good for 12, 13 points. He's good for 7, 8 rebounds. He's good for defense. He's got that edge. Again, that clip of bell to ass on 3. Saying basically, yeah, we kicked Missouri's ass. Now, they didn't, of course. But just that sort of edge and, borderline obscene, like, this is what we did to these guys. We made them our little, insert a word that starts with B. I love that. Getting fired up. He has a pretty cool demeanor about him. A quiet confidence when he, let's say, comes out of the court during starting lineups. He's got some swag. He's got all the tats. He's got the headband. But when it comes down to it, at the sake of being repetitive, the same way I talked about Kylan, there's some dog in Trey White. He's tough. He's really tough and quickly becoming a consistent guy. And now I look at that backcourt because you'll consider Trey White a backcourt guy, a wing guard, forward guard, whatever, but 6'6", can shoot the three, can take it to the rim, can guard the opposing guards. That's your three-man backcourt, and I feel really good about them. Really, really good about that backcourt. Front court, some signs of life as well. Merez Johnson is really good. An innate ability to defend. He got screwed yesterday on at least three of those foul calls. There was a supercut. I want to say, I forget if it was Glenn Kinley from WCIA. One of the TV reporters had put all 5 Merez fouls together. And I'm watching that, and I say, I think there might be 2 actual fouls in that. He did everything right. He got screwed, went straight up. The last one was a clean block. Of course, they anticipated the foul. So it made his night get cut a little bit short because he was playing closing minutes. He was playing crunch time because he could defend and he could get rebounds. And here's the thing. If you are not getting offense from Benham Rickhouse, then there's no advantage to playing him. Merez can get putbacks. He's pretty good around the rim. There were, I think, 2 of his 3 makes yesterday, and he was so close before halftime. Didn't quite get it off before the buzzer. I went to the bathroom at that point thinking, oh, it was good. But then they called it off. It was like, God, I just felt bad because it was such a great effort. He's good around the rim. Of course, you don't want him shooting free throws, and teams will probably, the more that Merez plays, foul him really hard and force him to get it from the line. But he's good at getting position. He's good usually at finishing. I just feel like, he needs more time, and he earned it yesterday. He earned it before that. But I would like to think that what he did against Missouri does, in fact, translate to a lot of Big Ten teams are going to play that have strong front courts. So Merez is ready to go. He will have freshman moments, I'm sure, but he's a smart basketball player. He gets it. And already is a plus defender and a plus rebounder. So that was encouraging. Missouri had big dudes, big team. And Merez went down, and he mashed with them, and he looked pretty darn good anytime that he was out there. Tomislav, offensively, he's not getting quite as many touches as maybe you'd like. Had one miss around the rim that was frustrating late, and I thought, God, Tommy, you got to make that. Not quite a layup per se, but an easy little turnaround from 5-6 feet. Just you're 7'2", man, or 7'1", make it. But a big 3 in the second half to help get you some cushion in that first part of the second half, and really steady and a great rebounder and a fine defender. He contests opposing bigs pretty well, and Missouri was not good around the rim yesterday. So, okay, we're feeling good, right? Dre Gibbs Longhorn, he had some good minutes. I guess, according to Jeremy and Derek, he was -11 in the plus-minus, which means that he was probably on the court when you gave up that 10-0 or 11-0 run, actually, from Missouri. But when I looked at Dre yesterday, I thought there were some positive signs. He had one take around the basket, I thought, in particular, that showed, okay, that's a second-year player that's starting to get it. Was very in control on that shot. Made a 3. Finished with 7 points, something like that. So, it was a solid game. And, yeah, defensively, I think there's still some positives to glean from that. He does have a tendency to kind of bump into a shooter. Like, the shooter just so easily feels like can draw a foul on Dre. And he'll learn that. He'll understand when not to let that guy hip check him. But I liked him on the court. I really did. Now, let's talk about this. Notice, we got 34 minutes into this podcast before I talked about Benham Rickhouse. So you can never accuse me of being negative. Well, you can accuse me of that sometimes. Today, you can't. Ben. I do not mean this in a patronizing way. He was trying very hard on defense. He was. He just was overmatched against Mitchell. Who was the other big? Well, there was the 300-pound guy, and then the third one. So they had 3 bigs, but it was really Mitchell that whenever he had the ball and he had Benham Rickhouse on him, it was easy. And in that opening stretch of the game, you're up 16-12, but it should have been more than that if you had just had somebody that could stop Mitchell in particular. You didn't when Benham Rickhouse was out there. He's a minus defender. I don't think we'll hear Brad Underwood lie to us because that's what he did after the Wisconsin game when he said, oh, he's the highest grade defender. No, he's not, Brad. Stop. Trying to build his confidence, that's fine. You're trying to do it through the media, through back channels. Yeah, he's doing great. We know it. You know it. The rest of the bench knows it. To me, honestly, that's the bigger concern. I can't speak as someone that ever played high-level sports because I never did. But I got to imagine when you're on a team, you got each other's backs, and you're going to give each other the benefit of the doubt for the most part. But if you see one team member that is not performing well, and yet they continue to get chance after chance after chance, and then there's all these other competitive dudes on the sideline like, Coach, I can do better than that. I do worry what that could do to the vibes in the locker room. I don't think it's going to get to that point, though, because I think yesterday was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of the idea of Benham Rickhouse being a starter that plays 30 minutes a game. I know Underwood would love to play Benham Rickhouse 30 minutes a game with the idealized version of what Benham Rickhouse was going to be for Illinois, which is a sharpshooter that at 6'9" presented terrible mismatches for the opposition, stretched that offense out. That was it. You paid him money, how much I'm not sure, to come in and make threes. That's it. And no one had any delusions about, oh, he's going to be a defensive stopper or he's going to lead the team in rebounds because he didn't have those stats necessarily at Evansville. But on a very simplistic level, if you see someone who is 6'9", and yet again they finish with a rebound, a single rebound in 21 minutes, which was his lowest minute total all year, that's a problem. You're 6'9". Grab the freaking rebound, including one that Missouri got, I believe, off a free throw yesterday that was all too similar to one that happened against Tennessee. If you aren't making your threes, then he cannot be played. He's not bringing you anything right now. So go back to the drawing board. Role player off the bench. Take some pressure off him. Don't worry about confidence. I mean, if there was confidence, it's got to be shot now. And if not, credit to Ben, because he's not showing it on the sideline. He's one of the first guys into the huddle, even if he's not playing on the court. So clearly he is someone viewed positively within the team. Probably doing everything right. He was making boatloads of threes before the game. It's, the talent is there to shoot. But here's my bigger concern. Just because a guy can light it up in practice, and just because a guy can light it up in the Valley, doesn't mean it's going to translate to the next level of basketball. And my biggest concern is that Benham Rickhouse is not just in a slump, but that it was a terrible misevaluation from Underwood and the staff. And to Brad Underwood's credit, there have not been many of those. He tends to do a very good job evaluating, and Marcus Damask may be the most obvious example of that. But for the most part, transfers in evaluating what they can bring work out pretty well. Go back to an Alfonso Plummer. You lose an Adam Miller, you need a shooter. He goes and gets a shooting guard from Utah. Now, Utah in the Pac-12, so they played some competition. But that worked out fabulously. That was good evaluation in a position of need. You brought him in, it worked out. Quincy Guerrier, a journeyman, had a bit of a slump, let's say in January, February, but still a key part of last year's team, a good evaluation. I mean, he could drive me nuts, but, it worked out okay. Justin Harmon, I think for the role that you brought him in for, you could have done worse, though he did struggle down the stretch. But I haven't had a problem with Underwood's evaluation. I think that's one of his strengths. So with that in mind, this might just be one of his rare misses. It's going to happen. It's his 8th year at Illinois. He's going to have some recruits that just don't pan out, whether it be high school or through the portal. I think that's where we're at. Now, with that in mind, how do you potentially put Benham Rickhouse in a position to succeed, even on a smaller level? And again, it's off the bench. You're a three-point shooter, role player, coming off the bench, be ready to shoot. And between him and Will Riley, who's also struggling, if you get either of them going, God dang, if you get either of them going from deep, you're in pretty good shape. You just aren't shooting the three very well right now. And the key reason why is because your two most volume shooters from three, Will Riley and Benham Rickhouse, aren't making them. KJ doing fine. Tomislav doing fine. Kylan, not shooting a ton, but he's not really making most of his shots from there. Trey White, he limits it, but he can make one. Did he make one yesterday? I forget. Regardless, Benham Rickhouse is on the struggle bus, and I don't think that that can be turned. I would love to eat crow and say that I'm wrong, but it's not just the inability to make a shot. It's that he is so overmatched in every other aspect of the game where it honestly feels most of the time that he does not belong out there. This is not just a slump. This is a dude that has not been able to adjust to this level of basketball and the speed of it. So for all the highlight reels, which were tantalizing to see how much of a pure shooter he was, and that size, you cannot teach that size. And to think, well, this is an NAIA to Evansville guy. He made that jump. He can make another leap. It does not appear to be the case. I will be interested to see what they do against Chicago State. Is that one last time in the starting lineup? Okay, I wouldn't be crazy mad if Underwood's using a bad opponent as an opportunity to get him going. But I do worry that you would be missing an opportunity to get someone else in the starting lineup to try a new five. To me, who would that be? I don't know. This is where you can see why Benham Rickhouse has kind of stayed in there by default. Will Riley doesn't necessarily play the four, despite having length. So depending on the matchup, if you got two bigs, you're in trouble. If you play Merez, then all of a sudden you are risking him or Ivasic getting in early foul trouble, and you can't bring one in for the other. I do think Merez will be 20-plus minutes a game now. You just can't keep him on the bench. And Ivasic, when not in foul trouble, is easily 30-plus. So what do you do? And I had this weird thought, and it might sound absolutely bananas. What I really liked yesterday was when they went small. In the second half, there was about a 4 or 5 minute stretch where Trey White was technically at the four. Now, that won't work if you're playing Maryland, and that won't work if you're playing Michigan, and that won't work if you're playing Indiana. But here's the thing. It also wouldn't work if it's Ben Humrickhouse against Danny Wolf or Vlad Golden from Michigan. It wouldn't work if Humrickhouse has to go against, was it Balo or who's the other big? Not Mbako, he's a wing. The other big from Indiana. It wouldn't work against Derek Queen or Julian Reese. I mean, that would not work for Benham Rickhouse. It just won't. It's almost like you got to get Benham Rickhouse in a super big lineup and have him be the three, and that could kill you defensively. But I don't know what to do at this point because you have such a discrepancy defensively when he's guarding a four worth a damn that I think, wait a second. What if Trey is an undersized four on defense? And then offensively, that creates a tremendous mismatch with Trey White being a quick, athletic four, standing 6'6", 6'7" on a good day, that can shoot from deep and can take it to the rim. Okay, well then who else are you starting? I don't know. Will Riley at the three. Or you do three true guards and have Dre. I know it might sound silly. Why not get Dre some starts? I just think that it is fair game to try to find the rotation that best begins and ends games. And I know that can be different. That starting five and closing five can be different. But if you are worried about Merez Johnson getting in early foul trouble, I understand not starting him. If you are worried about giving up size with Will Riley and his inability to defend a four, okay, I get that. But I just think the wild card here would be Trey White's ability to defend the opposing four respectably. And it doesn't put him in a great position. I understand that. And it wouldn't probably work against Julian Reese or Derek Queen. And it wouldn't work against Omar Ballo, who's a five, and then the other big for Indiana, whose name, for some reason, is escaping me. Probably wouldn't work against Danny Wolf or Vlad Golden. I just think that you might see more of that go small lineup where it's either just Tomislav or Merez at the five. And then the other four guys or any mix of your backcourt pieces, Will Riley, Trey White, something like that. I thought the smaller we went yesterday, the better and the more fluid it was. And even defensively, you saw a little bit more pop and a little bit more energy on that end. So this is why I'm not getting paid $4 or $5 million to coach the team. That may be just an outright terrible idea. I just know this. It can't be Benham Rickhouse. It can't. because I know the starting five does not mean you got to end the game with those five. And it doesn't mean that the starting five will be your biggest minute getters. But why would you put yourself in a disadvantage in the opening 4 or 5 minutes of a game where an opposing four can just say, do I have one-on-one against some Rickhouse? Good, I'm going. Because it did not work out well yesterday. Whoever he was guarding accounted for a lot of points from Missouri. More than, by far. Just this is eye test. I don't have it on paper, but you know it as well from watching that game. Whoever was on offense against Benham Rickhouse accounted for a ton of points yesterday. You can't have that. So I waited, 34 minutes, and it took me 10 minutes to get through that. So I apologize for being long-winded about Benham Rickhouse. It's not a personal thing, but Underwood, come on, man. I mean, I tweeted yesterday, coaching malpractice in the first half because they kept letting it happen. And I looked at the sideline, I'm like, why are you not substituting someone in? And the problem is it's not just a one-game thing. Teams will use that. Now, if you want to, and this leads me to my final point, which is going to sound a little negative, but if you want to take some solace in Benham Rickhouse struggling at finding a role, remember that Ty Rodgers at times last year, especially at Purdue, had a harder time finding a role, and opposing teams could sag off of him and make it that much more difficult for your offense, knowing that Ty couldn't shoot it. But I tell you what, this team isn't shooting that great anyway. You're telling me Ty Rodgers wouldn't have had some success against Missouri yesterday? Ty Rodgers was a flawed basketball player, and I understood that he didn't fit the mold of this team, and I was willing to give the benefit of the doubt to the coaching staff. But he is a plus player and was a plus player on an Elite Eight team with room to grow. You essentially said, Trey White will take your minutes. Fine. But who's to say that Trey White and Ty Rodgers couldn't have played together? Hindsight's 20/20. Why was I not saying this a month and a half ago when it came out that Ty was going to redshirt? Good question. Again, benefit of the doubt to the coaching staff that they evaluated it and said, Ty, we love you, but boy, talk about misevaluation. You go through an entire offseason, you get into practices, and maybe Benham Rickhouse truly was an Ubben legend, just hooping it up left and right, and you felt like, oh, my God, this guy's going to be averaging 15 points a game. He's that good of a shooter. Ty, I don't know what role you have. And Will Riley had something to do with that too, but I'm just saying, Ty was versatile defensively. Ty could body up against a wing, against fours that weren't super tall, and he was tough, and he'd get rebounds, and he was getting better at the rim. I know he was really bad against Connecticut, going at the rim, and he was up and down in the NCAA tournament. Some games you could count on him more than others. But he was an experienced Division I basketball player that had a lot of Big Ten wins, had a more pronounced role on last year's team, and you told him to sit. And then I watched Benham Rickhouse getting 30 minutes a game, 21 yesterday, and I'm thinking, wait a second. We just overthought ourselves here. And I will be bummed if the predictable outcome happens where Ty transfers. And then I'll say, well, let's see who Underwood goes out and gets because, again, he's been pretty good at evaluating. But I would hate to think that this all stemmed from one misevaluation, one bad misevaluation in Benham Rickhouse, and that a sort of secondary or tertiary consequence of it was Ty Rodgers got pushed out. Not because of Ben directly again. I mean, that would be a primary consequence. Oh, well, Ben came in to take his spot. That's not true. But we're seeing that Will Riley and Trey White have some versatility. And a Ty Rodgers could have some versatility. It's just the four position right now is just weird for Illinois. You don't really have a four. You don't. You got Merez, who's a 5. You got Tommy, who's a 5. I think you play Tommy at the 4 and keep him on the perimeter. Gives him a bit of a breather from going inside and banging around. Go 4 out, 1 in. I don't know. I'm throwing stuff at a wall, hoping it sticks, and that's why those guys get paid the big bucks at Ubben. Listen, these are X's and O's things that can be frustrating with Underwood, and I had moments of frustration yesterday. That's watching sports. I do want to be careful to balance that by saying I'm watching that game and seeing the talent that Illinois has on the court and realizing we're a good basketball program, and who do we most have to thank for that? Brad Underwood. So two truths can be held at the same time. And macro, I am very pleased with where things are at. And I do think he's shown ability to adjust, and I think it has to start against Chicago State going into your West Coast trip, your only West Coast trip of the year, against Oregon and Washington. Get your feet wet with some new rotations, find a new role for Benham Rickhouse, see if he can't be a role guy off the bench like a Luke Goody, and then go from there because there's a lot of talent on this team, and there's still a high ceiling. I don't want them to be hamstrung by trying to square peg round hole it with this notion that Benham Rickhouse has to be a starter. He does not. So you got other talented dudes. Figure out some way to make it work. I think it can. It'll be interesting to see how they go forward with the collection of talent that they have. But all in all, you won Braggin Rights. It was a thrilling game, a lot of fun. And it feels good whenever they hoist that ridiculously large trophy, 4 feet tall. And another video clip yesterday. Where's that trophy? I think Kylan was saying it. Maybe Trey White. Again, what's fun about this when you get all these new toys, early on, the emotional connection isn't there. Even as recently as the Wisconsin game, going into that, I was thinking to myself, why am I not more pumped? I mean, Wisconsin's in town tonight. I know we lost to Northwestern, but I should be up for this game. The game starts, I got into it. But you get to learn these players' personalities. To me, this seems like a pretty good collection of dudes. They seem to like each other. They seem to get along well and have some chemistry. And it's a far cry from 2 years ago where, again, hindsight 2020, but we knew by the Braggin Rights game that something was wrong with that team 2 years ago. No, this team likes each other. I mean, they play hard. I have no questions about their intensity. Defensively, I've been more than pleasantly surprised. They're pretty good. So the fun part is going along this journey and seeing how good they can get from here. It's a solid start, a frustrating moment or three. Alabama is what it is, fine. But really, Northwestern is the one that is as close to a bad loss as you have, though it won't count that way in the quads. And Tennessee, you should have had. You win one of those two, I think you feel completely different. But as it stands, if we were to grade it, it's not a C, and it's certainly not an A, but it's probably just a solid B. And for a team that finds itself at 8-3, and as Jeremy and Derek noted this today, and I thought that's pretty much right on. It seems like right on cue going into the new year, you're about 8-3. Brad Underwood has never had a perfect non-conference. Never. He gets hot, and his teams get hot mid-January on. Maybe a small swoon in there somewhere, but like this is a program that, kind of like the Izzo school, tends to get better as the season progresses. So I think we should be heartened by that. You're in a good spot. Your ranking at 24 isn't gaudy, but you got a lot of people understandably still wondering, what is this team? And even we can have moments like that. But overall, enjoyable start to the year. You have a superstar in Kasparas, and you have a lot of good pieces around him. So I'll be interested to see how they juggle it and find their way to the best version of themselves. Because whatever that may be, listen, you're in Auburn, which is just freaky good this year. And I don't think you're Alabama, though you could take another shot against them. But I do think you have the capability of being a team that come March is not one that other teams will want to face. And when all is said and done, there will still be games in March and tournament matchups, and hopefully more than a few of them, where Illinois is going to have the best guy on the court. And I'm not going to say he'll have a Carmelo Anthony-like moment. I mean, like, that was once in a lifetime. But it is not unheard of to see one guy just go on a heater and carry his team somewhere. So you got that dude, and you got some pieces around him that are figuring out their roles. And long-term, too. If you tell me that we have a bedrock, excuse me, my voice from yesterday. If you're telling me we have a bedrock going into next year of Trey White, Kylan Boswell, Tomislava Visic, Morez Johnson. And at this rate, can you really count on Will Riley going pro early? He'll be projected probably borderline late first round, early second round. We'll see, but I think you can offer money to get him to stay. But even without that, if you're telling me Kylan, Trey White, Tomislava Visic, and Morez Johnson is a foundation, you can work with that. And that just, I think, speaks to the overall health of the program. So, good place to be in. And another Braggin Rights victory, 28-15 in the series, 2 in a row. Let's continue that streak next year. Let's build a long streak. What was it, 8 or 9 in a row from Self to Weber? Maybe won't get that long because I think Dennis Gates is a solid coach, and Underwood's teams, other than last year, don't ever seem to have it easy in this one. Well, that's not true. Kofi's team, Kofi's junior year, they smoked Missouri too. But for the most part, these are close games. And it was fun, and it was exciting, and I felt really happy to be back down there and Cool to see that many people clad in orange walking the streets of St. Louis and basically owning that place. Basketball program's in a good place. It's fun to talk about it. I appreciate you letting me talk about it and listening to me blather on about it. But now it is time to celebrate Christmas. So on this December 23rd, thank you all again for listening. For those viewing in the YouTube feed, sorry I didn't get to your comments. I don't have a computer handy, so I couldn't quite read them on the screen, but I think I saw Smitty in there, and another one got posted as well. So thank you for tuning in on this 23rd of December, a big Christmas party that we're hosting tonight. Excited for that. And Ryan, you say a very Kylan Christmas. I feel bad that I couldn't get Kylan in the title, but man, Kasparas is just so good. I mean, I love Kylan. If I were to buy a jersey, and I can't believe I'm saying this after the first 2 or 3 games, I was very frustrated. I was like, everything you heard out of Arizona about what could go wrong with Kylan Boswell, it was worrying me the first 2 games, maybe 3. He's had a great month, and he has a role. He seems so much more comfortable now. Easy to root for. Champagne connection, great, but just like he could be from Los Angeles, California, and I would love the way he's playing right now. All right, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. And again, thank you, anyone else that's in there on this Monday afternoon. Have a great Christmas and a happy holidays. I do not anticipate being back until after the bowl game because we're going to Michigan. I'm going to Orlando. It's going to be a whirlwind in the best way possible. But thank you all for tuning in. Maybe I'll do a YouTube thing from Orlando at the hotel I'm staying at. Maybe I can get Harry to do that with me after we grab dinner. My first night down there. But what a great year overall if I don't have another podcast. What a great year. A 9-3 football team going to the Citrus Bowl, an Elite 8 appearance, what looks to be another good basketball team. Life is good. Life is good. And I do want to thank our sponsors, of course, as well. Hamilton Walker's Downtown Champaign, steak, seafood, and spirits. Check their holiday hours, but still a great place to go as you're over winter break to grab a delicious steak, an old-fashioned, which is good any time of year, but it has a little extra something come Christmas time. You know, that's my go-to drink. And I had a great meal there last week, and we'll be going with friends again in a few weeks. So sometime in January, got to pay off the debt, and happy to do it at Hamilton Walker's. State Farm agent Brian Hansen, online at brianismyguy.com. We appreciate him on a personal level for working with me and Kara for life and not life. I'm sorry. I have that through school district. We do homeowners and auto with State Farm. And the package deal that we have with them is tremendous. The price you would expect from State Farm, but it's the service from Brian and his staff that we appreciate. Great guy. Someone that's been with the podcast now for, I think, 3 or 4 years, maybe longer. So I appreciate Brian and appreciate all his staff. State Farm agent Brian Hansen. Dogtown Heating, Air, and Plumbing, your home's best friend. They are our HVAC people as well, and our house is nice and toasty, even in the coldest nights of winter, thanks to Dogtown. So if you are looking for an HVAC person for your heating or air conditioning system, make it the folks at Dogtown, 217-841-4728, and Owen Builders, LLC, online at owenbuildersllc.com. Appreciate Luke, always active on Twitter. He can get fired up, and I appreciate that. He's an Illini fan, and lets those emotions come out, just like I do. And that's fandom, baby. So, Luke, appreciate you and your staff. Check out a gallery of their work online at owenbuildersllc.com. But again, thank you if I do not talk to you before the new year. We'll be tweeting a little bit from Orlando and really looking forward to it, experiencing a Citrus Bowl, which is, other than the college football bowls, it's one of the big ones. And I will soak in every moment and hope it's a competitive game. I think it can be. And it looks like, other than Pat Bryant, you got everybody. And South Carolina, no Kyle Kennard, no Rocket Sanders, the running back. So great name, Rocket something. Hang in there. You know, you hung with Penn State. They're going to be in the college football quarterfinal. No, thanks to SMU and their quarterback. Jeez, that was a bad weekend, but you know what? That's been covered ad nauseum from other people. We don't need to rehash the college football playoff opening round. But whenever I do talk to you again, it will be rather soon, just after the holidays. We'll try to say hello from Orlando and have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you all for tuning in and making it a special year in the 200 level. Go Illini, and we'll talk to you soon. It is the 200 level. All right, thanks, YouTube. Have a great Christmas, and we will see you all soon. Bye, everybody.